Welcome into the Take the North podcast. Alongside Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune, I'm Adam Studzinski. I typically produce the Take the North podcast, and I'll be filling in for David Haugh today, who is taking a few days off and getting in a last bit of summer. Dan, summer is pretty much come to a conclusion for you and the rest of the Bears reporters out there. So I hope you had a good summer.
Don't do it to me. Please don't do it to me. I do feel it every year. It's earlier this year, obviously, as we've talked about many times because of the Bears' inclusion in the Hall of Fame game. The Chicago Bears rookies have already reported to training camp here on Tuesday, July 16th. The veterans will be there on Friday. The first practice is Saturday. And I look at my personal calendar and I see my weekends disappearing quickly, rapidly. Away we go. And obviously it's a very anticipated Bears season, but I could have used it to wait maybe 2 more weeks.
That's the things are getting going so much sooner this year. You don't really think about how fast things are going to move from here on out. But it is a day or a day that's brought us some news.
Yeah.
Everyone can rest easy. There's no drama in Bears country. It's official. Caleb Williams and Odunze have both signed their first contracts with the Bears. And so that's what we'll start here today. Dan, today being Tuesday the 16th, like you mentioned, is the day that the Bears rookies are reporting to training camp. And there was some questions about whether or not Caleb or Rome would be able to be there, because until today they hadn't signed their contracts, but it was all much ado about nothing. They're there and they're ready to go.
Couple hours apart. Rome was first. Caleb came a little bit later in the afternoon. But yeah, the I's were dotted, the T's were crossed. Those two promising rookies, a quarterback and a wide receiver, now under contract with the Chicago Bears through 2027. Both are under the CBA bargained 5th-year option as well, giving the Bears the option for 2028 if they choose to exercise it. That timeline is in the distant future, as you know, and a lot can happen in the span of 3 or 4 years. It's going to be really interesting to see how this unfolds. If Caleb Williams is who he has been advertised to be, who the Bears believe they drafted at number 1 overall, look at the spring and summer of 2027 as the time when, the first talks of a contract extension for Caleb Williams may begin. Again, that's a ways off, and he's got a lot of checkpoints to clear before that. But I bring that up because it does signify a window here for the Bears with their QB1 on a rookie deal of essentially the next 3 seasons to go compete without having to pay your quarterback an increasingly huge fee to be your starting quarterback, right? And so that's where they are. And so now it's time to capitalize on that. And now it's time for Caleb to get to work in his rookie training camp.
That is, they say it's the cheat code in the NFL to have a good rookie quarterback, or even a great rookie quarterback on that rookie. I should say a young quarterback on a rookie deal, because they're so much cheaper. Even every quarterback that signs, it gets more expensive, especially if they're the good ones. So it's an important time the next few years. So there's a couple details I wanted to dive into, and when it comes to just Caleb's contract. Do you think there was ever anything that they were really trying to fight for? Because there was, naturally, because of the high profile pick that he is, there was a lot of speculation about what they could be talking about. I gather that since him and Rome signed on the same day, days apart, that this was probably more of a logistical issue than anything.
I never got the sense that there was some grand issue that was causing a intense tug of war between the two sides whatsoever. I think there are things that teams like to have in place in their contract, and there are things that individual players and their representatives like to fight for. And so sometimes there's just a lot of negotiating back and forth to try to smooth things over, whether it's when the bonus money occurs, whether there's little technicalities within offset language or what else is folded within a contract. There are things that you just try to get ironed out. The Bears never seemed worried that this was going to inhibit either of these players' ability to be in camp on time. Again, the first practice comes Saturday, and that is going to be about a full week ahead of everybody else in the division. I think that the Packers may be the 22nd, and the Lions and the Vikings on the 24th is when they'll have their first practices. And so, look, they're on schedule right now, and off we go in a period where the Bears have to make the most of every minute. As we've talked about before, is just you need, with a roster that is ready to compete, with a roster that has legitimate playoff aspirations in 2024, you need the development to stay on schedule. And so to have Caleb in there on the day that everybody else reports, all the other rookies report, to have him there for the first practice on Saturday, away we go. And again, I don't think that there was anything really intense in the contract negotiation that led anyone on either side to believe, uh-oh, this could be a very tense standoff.
And I also thought that I was personally, and I know that most people that we talk to, like say at the Score or yourself, didn't ever seem concerned about this, and I never got concerned, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that Caleb himself, the way he's talked, the way he's carried himself, doesn't seem like he would want something like minor details in his rookie contract to inhibit him starting his NFL career in the best possible way that he could. And that step one for that was the mini camps. Step two is being in training camp on time and practicing starting from day one with no issues.
I think there was fears back in the winter, and it was almost, I guess, a little bit of myth busting that Caleb Williams was going to arrive in the NFL with intent on breaking the system and restructuring it in a way that made him a bit of a pioneer as an athlete that was going to reshape the way things are done. I think what we've learned about Caleb Williams in the time that he's been a Chicago Bear is that he has an intense focus on becoming the best quarterback to ever play the game, and he understands what is required to carry such lofty ambitions, and what's required is that you're invested in every single day in a football sense, that you're focused on learning the details of the playbook, that you're focused on working on the rhythm and timing of the passing game, that you're focused on creating connection with your teammates, that you're focused on understanding the intricacies of the playbook and all of the things that your coordinator wants to do in terms of communicating from the huddle or up in the booth down to the field, what your coordinator wants to do in terms of getting you ready to play each week. And so there's so many things that go into chasing this massive, grand, monumental goal that Caleb Williams has that I think he has understood how to keep himself grounded in that process. And part of being grounded in that process is to not let outside distraction take you off course. And in this case, he's not off course, and they're ready to go. And I think all of Chicago should feel a little bit of reassurance that really, since Caleb was drafted in April, it's been a very smooth path from there to here.
You use the term myth busting in there, Dan, and I think that that's a great phrase or word to use when it's come to Caleb Williams from the end of the college season and the NFL season until now. A lot of things that were out there about Caleb continually to be proved not true. There was stuff about him being a diva, about him not being a good teammate, about him. And I do think part of this is true. I'm going to say the word of being a disruptor. I think in a way he is, but not in a way that's, as we previously mentioned, is going to inhibit his own career on the field. And so every step of the way, we've been busting myths about who he is as a person and as a player. And I think it's interesting that some of this, like, it's as if people keep inventing new ways to talk down on him. And I don't know if that's ever going to stop unless he wins a Super Bowl for the Chicago Bears.
Look, he has personality quirks, he has eccentricities, but none of them are as I don't know what the word is, but they've been exaggerated, right? To a level that doesn't fit with who the guy is. I think the Bears believed very much in their pre-draft vetting process. I think they believed initially, and have given a lot of credit to their West Coast area scout Reese Hicks and their national scout Francis St. Paul for giving them pretty grounded and informed information on what they believed Caleb Williams' wiring was, what they believed Caleb Williams' leadership skills were, what they believed Caleb Williams' goals were. And as they went through each step of the pre-draft process, from the combine to the 3-day visit in LA before the pro day to the top 30 visit in Lake Forest, through every step of the way, they found a natural connection with Caleb Williams. It's only been enhanced since he got in the building, since he's been around his coaches, since he's been around his teammates. And there is nothing but positive energy coming out of Hallis Hall about the early stages of where they're going with this quarterback. Now, there also is an understanding of how many steps up the mountain they are. The mountain of winning a Super Bowl is miles away right now for Caleb Williams and the Bears.
I agree.
The mountaintop for Caleb Williams of being one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the league is miles away. And so trying to figure out how to understand that you can get there while understanding where you are right now is going to be a huge part of the 2024 story for the Chicago Bears. And it'll be very interesting to see how both Caleb and the team kind of navigate that in the months ahead.
So one other, before we get into some other stuff here, there's something else that I wanted to run by you, and I'm not sure if you heard or read this today, but Mike Florio was talking about how. So all right, so let me back up for a second. Caleb is not officially represented by an agent. He has a team of people that are helping him with this stuff, but officially he doesn't have an agent. And Caleb had said at a recent charity event over this past weekend that when asked about by the Tribune about his contract negotiations, he said that his team is working on it basically, and that he's, letting them do their thing. Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk found that interesting because officially nobody but Caleb can talk to the Bears about his contract negotiations right now because of NFL regulations. Basically, they only let NFLPA certified agents talk to teams on behalf of players. And so it kind of created this interesting back and forth about like who's really talking to the team. And, it's obviously much ado about nothing. The contract signed in I'm sure it was nothing, but it was just, I just found it an interesting kind of like little detail.
It is a fair storyline because you have, and maybe it's something that we can ask Ryan Poles about on Friday when we get him, about just how you go about handling the contractual side of Caleb Williams' world when he doesn't have an NFLPA certified agent. We ran into this with Roquan Smith just a few years back, and we all remember St. Omni as sort of the advisor to Roquan Smith, right? And so it signaled alarm bells because the NFL has rules in place that they want their contract negotiating agents to be NFLPA certified, so that it's not just this murky other world that everyone's living in, and there's all these different people trying to kind of manipulate and play the system or work in that way. So when you don't have an NFLPA certified agent, the letter of the law is that you have to just kind of handle it yourself. Now you can have a team like Caleb Williams does around you, but there's not supposed to be direct negotiation discussions between the team and another party that's not NFLPA certified. So it is a little bit strange. As you mentioned, it doesn't come into play now for Caleb Williams again, now that his rookie contract is signed and he's under contract with the team through 2027 at a minimum for a matter of years now. But it's certainly one of those kind of weird worlds. Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, another guy that hasn't had an agent and has been kind of working his own contract dealings, and is part of the reason that Lamar Jackson's contract situation got as complex as it did in Baltimore. Through the last couple of years before they finally found common ground. But it's an interesting world because I think there are an increasing number of players who don't see the need to give up a good percentage of their contract to an agent when they feel like, particularly in the situation like Caleb Williams is in, this is a slotted contract. It's 4 years. There's $39.5 million guaranteed. There's really not much wiggle room to change the numbers on it. And so some guys are opting to say, hey, why am I going to give up a percentage of that to an agent when I can just handle this myself? Now, again, you do need to have a team around you to help iron out some of the wrinkles, but it is complex at times.
Yeah. And I believe that Caleb did a while back say something like that. There's not really a lot to negotiate here. So it kind of gathered like don't really need an agent. I mean, if it was me, I would want one, but I don't have $10 million in the bank to hire a bunch of lawyers to help me out. Right. So
if we keep pumping these podcast numbers up, we both may have 10 million.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You never know. Right. And it's funny. All right. Can we flash back to the St. Omni thing real quick? Cause that was such like a crazy, like, I remember when that first came out and Roquan or someone leaked out that he was the St. Omni person was helping Roquan with his stuff, his contract negotiations or whatever. And so when we found out about that, the day that happened, I was filling in for the afternoon show on the board for the Score, and we get word of this. And Ray Diaz, who doesn't work on the afternoon show, was helping me fill out or helping me out as I was filling in. And so we were like, we got to try to find this guy. And Ray found a number for this firm that he supposedly worked for, but they couldn't give him like a direct number for this St. Omni guy. So I mean, obviously there's been speculation for years whether this guy's real. But Dan, a year, maybe a year and a half ago, I swear I found the St. Omni on Instagram, and I didn't end up messaging him or anything, but like I swear, like I found, like I did some cross checking. I found this account of St. Omni, and Roquan Smith was following him. He was following Roquan Smith. There was other people that are supposedly working with St. Omni that he was also following. Like I found the account. So I'm convinced he's real. That, I mean, it could be a ghost account, of course, but I'm fairly convinced it's a real person.
I'm convinced he's a real person. I'm convinced Phil Snow is a real person. I know David had some doubts about the defensive advisor that the Bears brought in the middle of last season. I always tell you to rearrange the letters in their names and see if you can find some hidden code in there, some Da Vinci code that points you in the direction. So maybe when we get off this podcast today, you can have a little magnet board that says St. Omni and Phil Snow and rearrange the letter of all those names and figure out if we can spell something, and maybe we'll crack the code of something more complex at House Hall that that sheds some light on things.
Maybe Phil Snow and St. Omni are all the same person, and they're working under different pseudonyms for various jobs around the NFL. That's an interesting conspiracy theory I'm going to work on. So, all right. So all right, we'll move forward. Anything else about Caleb and Rome signing, Dan, before we move on?
No, just that I think it's symbolic, right? It's an arrival now of 2 top 10 picks who have been tasked now with the responsibility of being the engines of the next era of successful Bears football. And so away we go. And again, it's going to be fun to see those dudes on the practice field when camp practices begin on Saturday. And I'm sure we'll be hearing from both of them in the first week of camp as all eyes will turn to the Hard Knocks chronicled Chicago Bears as we go forward into training camp.
I think we can all expect in the first episode of Hard Knocks, one of the first things to be Caleb and Rome signing at Hallis Hall, and a big dramatic a thematic thing going on over the top. So we'll go ahead and move on here, Dan. So it's something that you wanted to talk about here on this episode of Take the North is kind of an aside to expectations for this Bears team as they get going in 2024. So first thing we'll do is we're going to play. We have a soundbite here from Jaylon Johnson, who was making the rounds really in California this past week. He was on a bunch of different shows, including the Rich Eisen show, where he was asked about giving a message to the fans and people who are really excited for this particular season. So we'll play this clip and then we'll get into a specific reaction that I think that you wanted to react to. So here's Jaylon.
I think really just be patient. I think for us, it's been a long time coming. I thought they've done a heck of a job. I thought being patient. We've had, like I said, some rosters coming in through the city, but I thought this year, it's going to be special. Just let us cook. I thought that's the biggest thing I can say, man. Just let us cook. Let us get this thing going. Let it get rolling. I thought there'll be some really special things that we do for the city that we give to these fans that they haven't had in a long time. I know it starts with getting to the playoff or winning the division, getting to the playoffs. So that's something that we definitely need to do. We just going to really take this next month and a half really to gel together to find out what our identity is, come together and put all our mind, all our heart into the season, and hopefully we can take it somewhere special. But I feel like nothing happens quick, nothing happens overnight, and especially with new quarterback, new offense, new system, I feel like it's definitely going to take some patience, but in due time, we'll definitely get it going and get some wins to the city.
Okay, so you hear in there a couple times, Dan, he uses the word be patient.
Yep.
And that prompted a response. The show that I work on, Middays in the Score, the Bernstein and Holmes show, Dan Bernstein immediately said, no, I don't want to be patient. And it's really typical Dan for the most part. But it does actually bring up a good point, because there is, I think, a good section of Bears fans, observers who don't want to be patient right now. And they want, and it's understandable. Team hasn't been good for a while. Like, you want them to be good as soon as possible. But there is going to be some measure of patience, particularly in the first month, 2 months, maybe the whole first half of the season, where they get things rolling, particularly offensively.
I applaud Jaylon Johnson for helping the team to message this, because I do think this is going to be very important, particularly in this next 6 to 7 week span, as anticipation and eagerness builds for the season, about where people expect this team to ultimately go versus where they are now. Just like we talked about with the quarterback himself, who's the engine of a lot of this. But you hear some of the words that Jaylon Johnson said there, and I wrote them down as he was saying them. Just be patient. Just let us cook. nothing happens overnight. And I say amen, amen, amen to all three of those things, because I do think that there is a process to all of this. He mentions a new offense, a new offensive coaching staff, a new quarterback. That's going to take time to gel. He mentions the idea that this next stretch of training camp is going to be about forging an identity on both sides of the ball and figuring out what you're really good at, what you still need to work on, and adapting and evolving along the way. All of this stuff is going to take time. I do understand the impatience in this fan base. I do understand the rational sort of thought of, you can't keep telling me to wait when you don't deliver on what I'm waiting for. And the Bears have consistently not delivered on what their fans have been waiting for. And so telling them to wait again is like, hell no, we're not doing that. And I get that mindset. I would just also say that it's going to set you up for massive disappointment and massive anxiety if you're expecting this quarterback and this team to be a finished product when the season begins. If you're expecting this quarterback and this team to be a finished product by the time they go to London in November, if you're expecting the team and this quarterback to be a finished product even by Thanksgiving, I think it's very realistic to expect this team to contend for a playoff berth, to be in the mix for a division title, depending on how much distance the Lions put between them and the rest of the division, to be quite honest. And to be right in that mix and to show signs of obvious direction, to show signs of obvious progress in 2024. My fear, and part of what I hope this podcast does for some people, is set up the reality zone where we don't let the conversation get outside of the reality zone into a world where everybody's frustrations then create new conversations and new speculative worry and new fears and new this, that, and the other thing about where the Bears are and where they should be in terms of their schedule, in terms of where are they on schedule to being a legitimate team that can be a contending team. As you and I have talked about on this podcast many a times, the goal here is to be consistently competitive for a decade, to be in the mix to earn a playoff berth 8 of the next 10 seasons, to be legitimately in the Super Bowl hunt for half of that time. And so the goal is not to be in first place when November 1st rolls around, particularly with a rookie quarterback and a new offense. I'm just hopeful that citywide, Bears fans wide, we can continue to have a rational conversation. Naive on my part, probably. I have enough experience to understand that probably isn't going to happen. But I do hear Jaylon's words there, and I hear, just be patient. Nothing happens overnight. Just let us cook. And again, I say amen, amen, amen.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think that Jaylon was, what's great about Jaylon is he's so honest. Like, he's going to shoot straight with you. He's not going to overhype things. Like, so he's being real about where this team is probably going to be at to start the season. And offensively, things might be a little ugly. You might get 2 great drives and then a full quarter of just what is happening right now, even with some of the great receivers on this team. So I think that, and I do understand, like, you're particularly like the section of Bears fans that were huge proponents of Justin Fields and wanted the Bears to keep Fields and keep building around him.
Like, those people are going to be vocal. They're going to be loud.
They are. They're going to be the harshest critics for sure. And I do understand where they're coming from, to the point of, well, you told us Justin wasn't good enough and you got rid of him and you changed. Lots of people told us that Justin wasn't good enough. And you said that this kid's supposed to be better. Kid being Caleb Williams. What do you mean we can't expect them to be better right away? Now, I think, based on what I believe about Caleb Williams, I think we're going to see at least fairly similar quarterback play immediately, if not slightly better in some ways. But that doesn't mean it's going to be overall really successful immediately. Right. So, like, I do understand, like, kind of where they're coming from. I just wish that they could separate. Like, the Justin Fields era has ended. They have restarted at quarterback, and it's going to take a little bit of patience while he figures out how to play in the NFL.
Right. And look, like, this isn't my first rodeo with going through the quarterback growth process. It goes back to Christian Ponder in Minnesota, my time on the Vikings beat. And you watched Mitch and Justin, and you've been through this a few times to understand that, like, there are going to be flashes of brilliance that get everybody drunk with euphoria. And then there are going to be periods of inconsistency where you go, oh God, is this the same ride that we've taken 100 times before? And so, like, ultimately, it's going to be kind of a week by week eye test to judge direction, to judge growth, to judge development, while understanding that none of this is going to be linear. And so, look, like, we just got out of an offseason program where Caleb Williams was learning to master cadence, like, much less reading disguised coverages with, free rushers coming at him and trying to figure out where the best place to go with the football is a half breath after he takes the snap. So there's going to be periods where it looks majestic, and there's going to be periods where it looks ugly, and you just have to be patient, let it cook, realize nothing happens overnight. And again, I do think that the Bears have a responsibility to message this consistently throughout the process. That's Shane Waldron, it's Matt Eberflus, it's every time that Ryan Poles takes a microphone, it's every time a player has a chance to say, like, look, like, we're moving in the right direction. It just might not be at the speed that you want us to get there. But ultimately, let's just keep our eyes on what the ultimate goal is, which is, again, to be consistently competitive for a long stretch of time here coming up. And in order to do that, you've got to kind of just stay grounded with the step-by-step approach to climbing that mountain, because these mountains in the NFL are incredibly steep, incredibly difficult to climb, and often filled with rock slides that come at you from every different direction, and you've got to figure out a way to avoid them.
Right. What is the saying is Rome wasn't built in a day, right? So we gotta.
But he did sign in a day.
Yeah, he did sign in a day. He did sign in a day. There we go. All right. So all right. So because we mentioned Jaylon there, I do want one last thing before we get out of here, Dan, and it kind of ties into what we were just talking about Caleb's potential, and even though we might not see it quite immediately. Jaylon Johnson said multiple times in those media interviews we mentioned, and not just the Rich Eisen show, Colin Cowherd, he was on with Jim Rome. He mentioned in multiple interviews when asked about Caleb Williams that what he saw is special. He used the word special multiple times. And again, like I said, Jaylon is not going to mince words. He's going to tell you to you like it is. And so I think that is something that you can also keep in mind, like, even if it's not great right away, like, the players on this team have seen something, because Jaylon's not the only one that has spoke highly about, and again, it was just mini camps that they saw in practice, and there's no free rushers, etc. But Jaylon Johnson has seen some good quarterbacks now, and I like to think he knows a little bit what he's talking about.
No question. And look, like, that to me circles back to arm talent. And that's not to be confused with arm strength. It's arm talent. It's the ability to make throws from many different angles. It's the ability to make throws with many different speeds and touches on them. It's ability to make throws to all three levels of the field with accuracy in a way that keeps the defense from making a play on them. And Caleb has shown that ability very early in practices at Hallis Hall. He will continue to show it under a much higher powered microscope during training camp. And those wow moments are going to populate social media for a month and a half. You're going to see these videos, I promise you, and you're going to go, oh my God, this is, the second coming of Aaron Rodgers here. And it's the Bears version of, quarterback Jesus that they've been waiting 104 years for. And so the special is going to show itself. The quarterbacks who succeed in this league over long periods of time understand how to complement special with high doses of consistency, right? And that is one thing I think that really plagued Justin Fields, is you'd have these breakout games and they'd be followed by 3 weeks of, oh God, we can't throw for 180 yards, and so it's finding ways week by week, practice by practice, to be consistent and to let that special carry the day at times, but to let the consistency be the engine of everything you do. That's going to be the challenge for Caleb Williams. It's going to be one that's going to be really difficult early on, because as we've talked about, the expectation is there. The spotlight is there. The pressure is there. He's a very perfectionist, wired kid who really, despite all of the things he's accomplished in his young football life, has never been on a stage this big, has never been on a team with this much history weighing itself down. And so his ability to navigate all of that is going to be part of his success. But it's crazy. The next time that we talk on this podcast will be after the Bears have reported to training camp. And so now we get it all started, and all of the conversation can turn into conversation based on what's actually unfolding on the field, which will happen every single day, really, from this weekend through Labor Day into the regular season, and we'll have plenty to kind of dissect as the whole thing evolves.
Most definitely. And that's a good place to wrap up, I think, Dan, is we will be with you every step of the way. We will for sure have one more episode out later this week when David is back, and after Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles are both scheduled to speak later this week. So I'm sure we'll be talking plenty about that, and we'll keep it rolling. The off season is over. Summer is over. I know it flew by. It seems like just like, how long ago were we having the arguments about Justin Fields feel like they were a year ago. So it feels like it's been so long since and it was just a few months ago. Just
before we get out of here, I'm working on a big Caleb piece that's going to launch early in training camp, and I was going back through some of my audio from the winter, and it's easy to forget that, you know, like late January, there was still the question on whether Justin Fields was going to be on this roster either as QB1 or as a competitor to whoever they drafted. And you zoom out on that, and I'm going through transcripts and listening to audio, and I'm like, wow, like that feels like it was 5 decades ago now because of everything that's happened since Caleb Williams' arrival. But that wasn't that long ago, as you just mentioned. And so now we're in a new era, a new world, and it's going to be fun to kind of watch this thing unfold.
Yeah, the Bears civil war of Justin Fields versus Caleb Williams was quite a thing, and I think that someday we will have to really look back, like really think about like what was happening in that like 90-day period, or it wasn't 90 days, it felt like 90 days. But all right, we'll go ahead and wrap it up there, Dan. That's Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune. I'm Adam Studzinski. David Haugh will be back later this week as we continue to document everything about this upcoming Bears season. Thank you for listening to the Take the North podcast presented by Odyssey. Download, listen, subscribe, recommend to your friends, spread the word, and continue to support us in the ways that you have been. And because the last couple of years has been really awesome. And so we're hoping to keep it rolling. And we'll talk to you next time.
Great talk. See you out there.